Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Northern Roots, a special conversation with Kim McGuinness, the North East Mayor. This event is part of the Urban Transport Next series of conversations, which feature a live online audience on the topics that will help shape the future of urban transport. These conversations are hosted by the Urban Transport Group, the UK's network of transport authorities. Nexus, the Tyne and Wear Passenger Transport Executive, which is accountable to the North East Combined Authority, is a member of the Urban Transport Group. And the Urban Transport Group job is to ensure transport can play its full part in making our city regions greener, fairer, happier, healthier and more prosperous. We're nearly through the formal bit here. I'm Julie Elliott, and until the general election this year was the Member of Parliament for Sunderland Central for the last 14 years. And I'm now enjoying taking things a bit easier, not being as full on as being a Member of Parliament. But I'm delighted to be putting the questions today to my friend, the Mayor. There'll be an opportunity for the audience to pose questions at the end via the Zoom question box, and these will be picked up towards the end of the conversation we're going to have. And you can join the conversation on X, formerly Twitter too, using the handle @UTG_UK and the hashtag UTGNext. So now that's all over with, we'll get on with the more interesting bit, I think, which is chatting to Kim McGuinness, our very own Mayor for the North East. So welcome, Kim.
Thanks.
I think we're going to start with a few questions about you to help people get to know who Kim McGuinness is. Why did you want to become the first North East Mayor? And what does it mean to you to hold that position?
Oh, it means such a lot. And actually, you know, I never forget that I'm just very grateful for the people of the region for putting their faith in me, which it sounds very cliched and it's the thing that pretty much all politicians say, but I really mean it. You know, I'm from here. I was born and raised in the region, and I've been quite unapologetically for a lot of years a proper cheerleader for this place. And then similarly, I just have this real belief that we need to do things differently. And, you know, you and I have talked about this before. I have all of the respect in the world for the really, really tough job our parliamentarians do for us, you know, every single week in there shouting about the region in Parliament. But I just think that we need to be making more of our decisions in our regions, giving people more power and control over it, and, you know, having them closer to people's lives. And so the fact that we now have a mayor, I think, is a really good thing for the region. I'm really proud that it's me, and frankly, I love the place, and I just want to make it the best it can possibly be. Make sure kids like me growing up here get the best possible opportunity.
Couldn't agree with you more. And was there a sort of a sliding door moment that made you think, yes, I want to be on this path, this is what I want to do?
So I don't think that there was ever a sliding door moment as such that made me want to become mayor, but there definitely was that made me, you know, take that step into politics in general and being elected. I'd had a really good career working in both the private sector. I've worked in finance, insurance. I've done a lot of relationship management and that kind of thing, and also in the charity sector. So in educational charities, and also working with people from multiple complex disadvantaged backgrounds and supporting them, leading those charities. And so I was quite happy doing that, you know, really fulfilling jobs. And I'd moved back to the North East and started to do a bit of campaigning. It was around 2012. And at the time, we all thought that the coalition government was the worst thing that had ever happened. We had a lot to learn.
How wrong we were.
We had a lot to learn. But I'd started to knock on doors, because the things that were my bread and butter in my community when I grew up, you know, the libraries, the community centres, were being affected by the austerity programme. You could start to see what was going to happen, and what that meant to me was, you know, as I said, kids like me growing up on those working class estates, just not having access to the things they needed. So I started doing a bit of door knocking for the Labour Party. And our mutual good friend, Catherine McKinnell, said to me, you should stand for the council. And I said, don't be daft. Do not be daft. I can't do that. I'm not, I'm not qualified. I'm not old enough. It's not for people like me. And she very quickly corrected me and said, it absolutely is. And then came back another time and said, look, we need people with life experience. We need people who work. We need younger people. We need women. And I still said, no, maybe it's another time. And then she came back to me and said, we need you to stand for the council.
That's good persistence. I like that.
Yeah. And in the end, that was it. I was standing for the council. And I stood in 2013 and I lost, I lost that seat. We expected that. But it was those kind of conversations on the doorstep and, listening to the real concerns that people had and thinking, actually, if I do this, I'd be able to make a difference for them. I kind of got the bug, and the following year I stood in the seat that neighboured where I grew up and was elected a councillor, and then quite quickly appointed to the cabinet. And then I had sort of a similar experience when Vera Baird moved on from being the police and crime commissioner, where a couple of people approached me and said, look, have you thought about this? You're doing a lot of work on prevention, public health, on public services, and working a lot with police on major events in the city, Newcastle. And I sort of thought about it and went for it. And I think that kind of as the devolution process was happening, it felt iterative and it felt like it was the right thing to go for the mayoral role, because, in terms of that creation of opportunity, putting this place out there on the national, international stage, talking it up, giving it the profile that it deserves, and then making those really key decisions about things like public transport, making them work for real people day to day, skills, all of that we're now working on. And then crucially, the opportunity to make a difference on things like, the poverty that too many people in this region experience. I think it was a much more iterative process that led me to stand to be the mayor, rather than the kind of tap on the shoulder revelationary moment.
Yeah, that's how it is for most people, to be honest.
Yeah.
And, when you were growing up, did you have any role models? It doesn't have to be political. And do you have any role models now that you sort of look at and think, that's how I want to do my job?
I mean, it's again a real cliche, but my mum, and I think that's actually really common for, working class women from our region and probably from others. You watch your mum kind of cope and achieve really good things and do well regardless of the really difficult circumstances. I think, I've talked about it before. We grew up in relative hardship, and we were really protected from it. We had a really loving family who gave us everything that we needed, and you could see around the edges that things were really, really difficult at times. My dad worked on the shipyards. He was a scaffolder. He worked in kind of a lot of short-term jobs, the redundancies, the kind of the strikes, the contract then coming back. You never really knew what was going to happen at Christmas because it was always that time of year. And my mum working in kind of part-time and insecure jobs until she got into the civil service, where she stayed for the whole of the rest of her career. And, we had everything regardless of the fact that we had an out. And I think that's a real, I feel lucky for that. And I still don't know how she did it. And I still don't know how she did it without us really noticing until we were somewhat older. And I think it's much harder to do that now, I must say. But we had that kind of supportive family in the round. So definitely her. And then as I've kind of moved into politics, some of the women that we all have looked up to in the party, people like Harriet, who have really changed the face of the way that we do things, Harriet Harman, and changed the narrative about women in politics, which I think is really, really crucial. And then I've been lucky to have some fantastic role models, people who, I've taken guidance from, you being one of them. I've lost count of the number of phone calls I've made to you to say, oh my God, what about this? What about that? And that is so important. And in a way, I think those relationships are as important as the far away role models that you look to.
I think it's those people in and around you in the same community who have the same shared experiences, isn't it, really? And,
Completely,
you know,
completely.
the story you're telling resonates. I mean, I'm, a few generations older than you, Kim, but that's my background. I think that's a very common background of people from the Northeast. And I know in your campaign, the video your dad did at the shipyards, the number of people who mentioned that to me on the doorstep and said, "Oh, right, she's one of us." It
Yeah,
really resonated with people.
it's just, I think it's that we're a family who, we're of the region, but we've also through generations chosen this life, chosen to be here, be part of its future. That's a thing that people talk about all the time, that kind of pride of who you are and where we're from and what we do, and pride about the region. And I think if I go out there into the street here or in Sunderland or in Durham or into the countryside, people will talk with real passion about where they're from, and that usually comes with a bit of a family story about their upbringing. It's really, really intrinsic to the decisions that we make. And I'm really conscious that myself and the mayors, that there's now 11 of us, are changing the way that politics is done. We're changing, in a sense, together with the government, we're trying to change the way a country's run, so that those affinities, those kind of place-based things, that feeling that people have of home, actually means even more in the decisions that we make. And so I'm really conscious that there'll be people looking at us thinking, oh, that's really interesting. And, I'd love to think that there's girls growing up in this region who look and think, I could totally do that, because they can.
Absolutely. Of course they can. Go girls. So we're here today mainly to talk about transport. That's the main issue of today's conversation. So growing up in sort of the west of Newcastle, what was your experience growing up of public transport? Because it would be key living where you lived. And what shaped your views about what you think needs to be done?
Well, I think one thing that it's important to say, like many households in this region, we didn't have a car until I remember my dad getting a car, and I remember it being an absolutely massive thing. And it being a Nissan Bluebird, so which I now know would have been built in the region, which is like a lovely little circular thing. But we didn't have a car, so my experience would have been walking to school, getting the bus into Newcastle on a weekend, often with me nana, and going to the market, and then carrying all the bags back on the bus. And it being that thing that kind of connected us to those important places that we needed to go. And then later, having to get 2 buses to school, because I didn't go to school right next to where we grew up. But it is such an important feature of kind of the life that we had in that working class area in the West End of Newcastle. And I remember just how important it was to feel connected to other places and to be able to get that bus, particularly when, you didn't have a car. I also remember, and I think this is really important, because I think, sometimes we forget about this, being a kid and going everywhere on my bike, zipping absolutely everywhere, never getting out of breath, which is like, I don't understand that. But it does remind me that those routes, and enabling young people to be able to travel in that way and get about on the bike, it's really freeing. And we possibly don't think about that and talk about that enough in this wider conversation about transport.
Absolutely. So you mentioned buses, and buses are hugely, huge in the Northeast. And some 128 million passenger journeys by bus in the year ending last March last year. So you've pledged to bring buses back into public control, and are on the road to the franchise services model. What difference do you think that franchise services model, will make for passengers? And what do you see the challenges that you're going to face in bringing that model about?
Well, look, buses are the biggest form of public transport. The majority of people who travel by public transport will use the bus. We're obviously very lucky. We do have a metro service in part of the region, but it is just part of the region. Buses are absolutely fundamental. And we started that process on day one of bringing the buses back under public control, because I think through years of privatisation, what we've seen the fares creep up, notwithstanding the cap, which I'm sure we'll talk about. We've seen routes cut, and some of the biggest cuts anywhere in the country have occurred in this region, and particularly in our rural areas. I know we're talking about urban transport, but in our rural areas, and we've seen them not necessarily going where people need them to, but prioritising those profit-making routes. And those are all things that, with a publicly controlled model, we can change. We can control the routes, where they go. We can design the system so that it fits with our wider public transport system, that integrated approach that allows, you know, buses to talk more, because they do talk to metros, but buses talking to metros, talking to the mainline train, talking to our active travel network, so that it's much more joined up fare structures. We'd have control of that fare box, so you're not necessarily always sending the buses where the profit is made, but, you know, running them as an actual public service. And what we've witnessed where this has happened before, Greater Manchester being the prime example, is you see more buses, more people using them, lower fares. And that's what we want. You know, we want it to be greener, more reliable, more affordable, and have people to be able to have a say in the public transport that they use the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is, there's so much of the region relies on buses. And, you know, after 6 o'clock at night, weekends, bus services in many parts of the region, as we know, just aren't there. Which, you know, it's impossible to travel then for most people.
Exactly. It's that. So, you know, that holds people back from work. It holds people back from opportunities that are not standard 9 to 5 hours. It holds people back from, you know, expanding their skills. It holds people back from social opportunities as well. And all of those things are absolutely crucial. And I've lost count of the amount of times, and I'll count myself in this because I've done it myself, where, you know, you start on a bus and you think, if only it went here instead of there. So my example is always, I live in rural Northumberland. The bus takes an hour to get to Newcastle. I could be there in 25 minutes in my car. But if it just stopped at Morpeth train station, I could be in the town in half an hour. It's much easier to prioritise in that way. And, you know, I hear that exact tale about buses, you know, out in County Durham, not necessarily stopping at a train station. It's really great you have a direct bus, but we need to make it much more normal for people to be able to tailor their journeys so they can get there the most efficient way and have a fare that works right across the board.
And that's about using your local knowledge of the region as opposed to some company based in goodness knows where making the decisions.
And talking to people, talking to
I'm talking to people.
Users, yeah.
And you mentioned the metro. The metro is such a huge part of our lives if you live near the metro, but you know, it's long overdue, the new trains that are due. 362 million being spent on the new trains. I think 46 of them are in testing phase at the minute. So what is the significance to you of a locally owned train fleet? And how important is the input from local communities into the design of the trains themselves? Because that's what happened. How important is that?
So I think to give context to the metro fleet, and we don't often get the chance to talk about this at length, and there's probably somebody from Nexus sat watching this thinking, oh my God, what's she going to say? You know, we've just talked really nostalgically about, you know, my childhood growing up in Newcastle, you know, yours growing up in Sunderland. And to put it in context, that fleet, those trains are older than me. And when I was getting the bus when I was a kid, the fare was 5p. So that tells you how long it is since we've had those new trains. And I tell you what, they've done us a job, and they've done it for a really long time. And the engineers that keep those things on the rails deserve all the credit in the world, because although we do definitely have issues with reliability, and it's a problem, they are very, very old. And so changing them will be transformational. Because people have been consulted in what they look like and what they feel like, what the seating's like, you know, what the design's like, what it's going to be like to travel on one day to day. You know, people have been consulted on that feeling of safety, you know, seating arrangements that work for women and girls, accessibility for people with mobility issues, and all of those things being introduced onto the Metro at the same time as, you know, new trains helping to improve that reliability will really make that system feel as modern as it deserves to be, because we deserve a world-class public transport system here. And this is one of the things that's holding us back. So I'm really excited, and people will have probably started to see them on the lines be tested. And so we're very nearly there, and we want to get them out with passengers on as quickly as possible. And so drivers are obviously in training now, and hopefully enjoying the much improved driver experience of these modern metros in comparison to the old ones. But it is a really big moment for us to have those, and it will really change what metro travel feels like.
I mean, it's really exciting as somebody who uses the Metro quite a lot. You know, passengers, you hear the creaks and grinds on the Metro and you think, oh, is it going to get there? So it's not just the reliability. You've outlined some of the many other things that are going to really, I think, transform the passenger journey so much. It's so exciting, Kim.
It is, and
we need them there.
Well, I'm reticent to say too much, but we are creeping close to the end of the year, but we want them out by the end of the year. And I think that people can look forward to travelling on the new and improved metros, and I really do think it will transform what it feels like, and people will feel like they have the investment it deserves.
Yeah, one of the other things you've talked about to do with the Metro is the Metro expansion to Washington, and also the reopening of the Leamside line, which can have a huge benefit to our region. So could you explain why you think those things are important and what the benefits will be if they happen?
So we've already obviously started work on the first stages of getting the Metro to Washington. I think in terms of that Metro extension, we haven't had an extension for ever such a long time. And I think a lot of us will remember when the Metro started going to Sunderland, and it was a really big thing. Washington is, by some people's measures, the third, by some people's measures, the fourth, but it's a very, very big town, the fourth largest town in Britain that doesn't have access to a train station. And so for me, that extension makes perfect sense. It also connects up some really important sites in our region, like Nissan, IAM. It is opening up opportunity for more people to be able to use public transport to get to those crucial jobs. And then further than that, as we look down that line to Washington, down that line into Sedgefield on the Leamside line, there's huge opportunity for us to invest in good quality housing, more jobs down there, as well as connecting those big places that already exist to other places. So it's a combination of, yes, a better connected region, yes, more access for people who already live here to go to really good jobs, but to create more jobs and to create more good quality housing that is really well connected by a railway line. I think the other thing that we don't talk about very often with the Leamside line, so the kind of wider mainline rail part of that extension, it's all part of the same line, but some of it is metro, some of it's mainline rail, is it frees up capacity on the East Coast Main Line. So it could take slower trains off the East Coast Main Line, allow us to stop more and have more passengers use those trains, but also allow more trains up and down the East Coast Main Line. So it also unlocks more flexibility in the way that we travel. So the way that I see it is that the Metro is critical regional infrastructure that we really need to see extended into Washington, and the Leamside line itself, connects up County Durham, but it is critical national infrastructure that allows us more flexibility for local and national rail travel.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And you mentioned earlier about cycling when you were a child, and one of the things that you've talked about is active travel and wanting to reduce massively the number of shorter journeys that are that currently car train, bus or whatever, to have those either cycling or walking. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're going to achieve that, and what investment you're making in trying to make some of these happen, and if there's any projects that you've got ongoing that can sort of show us some of the things that you're doing on this or planning to do on this? Because you have only been there a few months, you can't do everything yet.
I've only been here a couple of months, although it's easy to forget that, I'm definitely the sort of person who wants everything done yesterday. And it's, some of these things we're talking about, bringing the buses back under public control, the Leamside line, the Washington extension. I have to stress, and we've got to be honest, these are really long-term projects. We get them started, we do the work, and, we work to build the funds, but these aren't things that are going to be complete, that those extensions won't be complete in this term. It'll take longer than that. We have to keep going, and we'll be able to say more about the scale of investment in active travel soon. And to give a teaser, we'll be able to say some more very soon. But as an approach, I think where we need to get to is much more joined up. So what we've seen, and it's partially the way that the previous government have funded these kind of initiatives, is we've seen some really good active travel routes. A really good example is the new one in Tynemouth that kind of runs along the seafront, separated from the road, separated from the pavement. It's lovely to be able to see kind of cars, bikes, pedestrians, everybody having their own space, and actually a good use of space, meaning that it's really comfortable to do that. We want more of that. But because of the way it's been funded over the years, it tends to be little bits here and there of really good infrastructure that don't join up necessarily in the way that we want. What we're trying to achieve, or what we need to start to move towards, is a joined up system, so that you can make some or all of your journey by active travel, and you can know that your route is safe all the way. And so that means thinking more about how we join it to the metro and the train, thinking about how we might work together to get kind of buses and bikes to be talking more to each other, because that's a challenge at the moment, and joining up our places so that people can make those choices rather than kind of one-off bits of infrastructure. And that's the direction that we need to move in, and bringing it all to a regional level, having the 7 local authorities round the table together makes that much easier than it used to be. So that's the direction of travel for, excuse the pun, for active travel. And then I think the other thing that we don't talk about enough is the safety of our public spaces and the accessibility of our public spaces, both for people who need to wheel, so people who might have mobility issues, and also the thing that all of us are, which is a pedestrian. Every single one of us will walk or will travel on our own steam, rather than using a bike, a car, a bus, a metro, whatever it might be. And so I'm really focused as well across our network on making public spaces safer, more accessible, and thinking about how people actually want to use them in a modern world. And so I think that has to extend to how we think about our high streets and local places, how we think about bus stations and metro stations and all of that. And we've got the local transport plan consultation out at the minute, which I'm sure you'll ask me a question, which will give me a bigger chance to plug it. But, this is the biggest conversation that we've ever had in our region about the transport network. We're planning that from now until 2040 for what transport across our region looks like. And all of this is under consideration, up for discussion, out for consultation.
How long because you might as well talk about that now, Kim, how long have people got to take part, and how do they take part in that consultation?
So they've got until well into January. So we wanted to do this over a really long period of time. The consultation is available online.
So that's real meaningful consultation over that period.
It has to be. I've not got an ego that tells me that I know everything about public transport or transport in general. I think that would be ridiculous. As a mayor, I cover 7 local authority areas, 21 parliamentary constituency, 2.1 million people. I need to hear people's views and their day-to-day experiences. And I think what I must stress, and I'm really conscious that there's a lot of people with a real interest in public transport who will listen to this. We need to get beyond that. This is not just for people with an interest in public transport, it's for everybody. The last time we consulted on public transport in the region, 62% of the respondents were men. And so we'll also be doing some...
That shows people weren't going to the right places to get the responses, because they're not 62% of the population.
Exactly. And so we need to be out there, or we are going to be out there doing some in-person events, you know, asking people about it. We're taking the opportunity during other types of discussions to have the conversation about public transport. There'll be phone calling going on. So there's a huge amount being put into making sure that we're getting a really solid response to that. I want to call it a conversation rather than a consultation. And I would urge people, even if you don't think about yourself as a public transport user, even if you drive everywhere, even if you don't have a car and you walk everywhere, we need to hear from you, because we want to know what your experiences are so that we can be planning for the next 15 years.
I'll be feeding in my bugbears, which are lampposts in the wrong place, which means you can't stay on a pavement with a twin buggy. Long time since I had twins, but I'll never forget it, and I still spot a badly placed lamppost. And the other thing that drives me nuts is cars parking on pavements, which means people have to walk on the roads to go around them, often with buggies, wheelchair users. They're just such simple things, and I think that's a bit about education, actually.
And design.
They're my two biggest bugbears. Anyway, this is not about my issues.
We'll write them down. We've got them. Somebody take a note of what Julie's
I won't let you forget, don't worry, Kim. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was about safety on the Metro. And I know when you were Police and Crime Commissioner, one of the things that you were very keen on was a strategy to tackle violence against women and girls, not just in the home, but in the wider community. So are there any specific interventions that you'll be making to make women and girls feel safer on transport in the Northeast moving forward? Because it is a big issue, travelling at whatever time of day, actually.
It's a huge issue. And, I'll never forget the outcome of the surveys that we did while I was Police and Crime Commissioner, that told us that actually one of the places that people feel the least safe, and particularly women, is using public transport at night and then walking around our parks and green spaces. And so all of that really needs to be considered. In the local transport plan, we've got a section on public safety. We don't have to do that, but I think it's really crucial. And it is a case of how do we take what we're doing now, which we'll continue to do. We're not stopping with having good levels of security on metros, continuing to work with the police, making sure that we're working with those bus companies. Obviously, new metros will have even more improved new technology, the same with new green buses that are gradually being introduced. And so the technology will help us all the time. But I'm always aware that I can stand here and go, do you know it is safe because you've got this and this and this and this and this. If you don't feel safe, it makes no difference, because you won't travel. And I've been there, we've all had that, oh my God, is it better to walk home or get a taxi or get the metro, we've all been there where we've made those choices. So we want to know now, what are the next things? And I know that the answers and the things that we will continue to improve will be things like lighting and CCTV, increased staffing, gate lines on metros. All of those things are the common sense things. But quite often, in my experience, the solutions, the things that we haven't yet thought of, are the ones that do come from these conversations. And so I will be holding specific women and girls sessions to have conversations about their experiences of public transport and of travelling around the region. But I would also urge anybody who hasn't felt comfortable and does have an idea about what would make a difference to come forward and let's talk about it, because it's crucial. We can't afford to do everything straight away all at once, but we need to be really clear that safety is one of the priorities when we're talking about improving our public transport. I think the other thing is that we have to call out the bad behaviour, and make sure that we're highlighting it and making it really, really clear. We won't accept it. We will not accept any of the harassment or the abuse or the antisocial behaviour or anything else on the public transport network. And we have seen, since the introduction of security on metros and intensified measures to keep people safe. We have seen significant reductions in that kind of behaviour, and also on the buses, but it's still not good enough until people aren't telling us it's a problem.
No, I mean, as a public transport user, it feels better when you see the security guards. It is making a difference, but it's also, I think, as these measures come forward, is actually letting people know, letting the community know that they're happening, because the perception often is, oh, it's not safe to do that, and things have often changed. So I think it's, you know, there's two things there, but
Yeah,
people should feel safe when they're travelling.
it's a right. We all have the right to feel safe. And I got an email the other day, and I won't I'll try really hard to I'll keep the details vague because it is somebody's personal experience. But we also I think quite often of this as an urban problem. And I was contacted just the other day by a woman who was making journeys on the mainline rail into a very rural area and experienced exactly some of this kind of, you know, rowdy, outlandish behaviour, rude comments, you know, all of that kind of thing. And we need to control the things that we can control when it comes to things like metros, buses and all that are kind of in our purview. And then keep working with the rail operators and the British Transport Police to make sure that actually your experience of travel everywhere is safe, because it is so limiting if women, or if anybody, but it's so limiting if a big proportion of the population just don't feel like they can go out on public transport.
Absolutely, because we want more people on public transport. And one of the things that, you know, is a challenge not just for transport, but a challenge for everything that we're doing in the policy arena is climate change.
Yeah.
And your new local transport plan seeks to deliver a greener, more integrated transport network that works for everybody by 2040. It also talks about the transport network being more resilient to extreme weather events. So it's quite interesting that we're talking about this today when we've got a tiny bit of snow, but often
Everything is working today. I do just want to say everything is working today.
Lots of gritters out, and actually the snow coming this week, there's been a lot of warning for it. It hasn't hit us suddenly, which I think sometimes causes a problem. But what specific measures are you taking, Kim, to make the network greener whilst tackling climate change? And does the combined authority have a net zero target or a target to work towards?
So you know, I think what we have to be always conscious of is actually by making our public transport more well connected, better connected, more integrated, easier to use, a more appealing option. That is a big part of our journey to net zero, and it's a big part of our fight against climate change, because the more people that feel like they can transition from a private car onto a public transport mode or travel in an active way, the better, the fewer emissions. We also have to be making sure that we continue to make that network greener in itself. And so we've made really big investment into electric buses, which we'll start to see more of coming onto the roads. And that's really good. Zero emissions buses will really help. We obviously, you know, a cleaner, better metro fleet, which is all great. And of course we want to support people out of their cars, but at the same time we have to be thinking about the fact that this is a region that is 3,500 square miles. It is massive, and with the best will in the world and the best public transport network anywhere, we won't be able to get everybody that choice. And so things like improving our electric vehicle charging infrastructure so more people can make a choice for electric vehicles, working with the government to put those incentives in place to help people transition into EVs, I think is also really crucial. So there's lots of different strands to this, with ever the awareness that actually one of the biggest contributing things that we can do is to help people to make more of an active choice, or to help people to make a public transport choice rather than their car, at the same time as supporting people to make greener choices with their car. So we are always considering all of those things in all of the decisions that we're making, because it now is, I think, critical. It is crucial. The next generation of people, we owe it to young people growing up now, and they are the people who feel the most passionate about this for all of the obvious reasons. You know, they're the people who rely on public transport now, and we want it to become a habit that they can make that choice for the rest of their lives.
And it's absolutely, it's got to happen. This is not a negotiable policy area. Climate change is with us, and we have to do what we can to alleviate it.
And it worries me actually that we've, you know, without getting too philosophical about it, it does feel like it's been weaponized in politics too often, and, you know, almost like it is a choice, like a culture wars thing. Well, you know, that it's bad for everybody if we have these targets. It isn't. It's necessary. It is not a choice. You know, we are in a critical turning point, and if we don't take action and we don't do these things now, then it is not a reversible thing. And so I think we've got to really take some of that negative politics out of it, or really push back against it and say, you know, this is not a culture war, it's not a choice, this is the future of the planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in your manifesto prior to the election, you talked about creating the infrastructure of opportunity, and you've alluded to this a bit with, you know, the different types of transport issues there are across the region. But how will your proposed changes to the North East transport system have a positive effect on social mobility? And I think, you know, particularly probably affecting the more rural areas in the region. Because in Tyne and Wear, we are quite well connected, even with the grinding metro and the bus services not as they were. But once you get out of Tyne and Wear, it's a very different picture. So how will it impact social mobility, Kim?
Well, when I talk about the infrastructure of opportunity, this is literally what I mean, transport. What we have to stop doing, and you've seen government do it for ever such a long time, is think about transport as a bubble, as its own thing that exists on its own, you know, is about getting from A to B. Transport, public transport in particular, it's not just about getting from A to B. It's about getting to opportunities. It's about unlocking those opportunities. And what I never want to hear in this region, but I do hear too often now, is people making the choice to maybe not do the job that they want the most, or that is the most fulfilling, or that pays them the most, or to not take up the educational option that they most want because it's just inaccessible, because they can't get there, because the transport system doesn't allow it. Transport is an enabler. It is there to enable us to get into school, to education, to work, whatever it may be, to improve our skills, to increase our social circle, social capital, all of those things. And so when we're thinking about improving a public transport network, you know, more connectivity in our rural areas, giving more people access to better, more affordable public transport, it isn't doing it for the sake of transport. It's doing it so that they can access the things that they so desperately need, whether that be crucial hospital appointments, whether it be a good job, or whether it just be access to the social circle that they need the most. And I think one of the things that we can do best for young people is to enhance that opportunity through better public transport and more accessible options for more young people. This week we've made the choice and the announcement that we will fix the £1 fare on our public transport network for under 22s for the foreseeable. And I'm pretty determined to keep it there up until 2028, because that really does unlock opportunity. It makes it more affordable for young people to be able to get round. That's crucial. I'm really glad it's something that we had in our region. We need to really fight to keep it. So when things are difficult, that's the choice that we'll make, because that infrastructure of opportunity is so very important.
And opening up young people's horizons as well. It's so important. It's a really, really important initiative. Devolution is, you know, obviously you are the first person in our region to be representing the whole region as a result of all the devolution changes in this country. And transport is one of the things that, you know, your responsibility comes down to. And the recent budget confirmed that the North East will receive an integrated settlement from the start of 26-27 financial year. What will this mean for the region, and specifically for transport?
So what it means is effectively us being treated more like a government department, like, you know, people who are in control of our own destiny in our region, more choice, more ability to control our own decisions. Devolution under the previous government, you know, we have gone a long way. We've come a long way since where we were, since we only had a couple of mayors in a couple of parts of the country. There's now 11 with an increasing suite of powers. But a lot of the money that we have received and have had devolved along with the powers have come with, you know, ring fences and caps and silos, and they've also come with bidding processes, and you know, some of it's only short term and it's one off and it's harder to access and we have to compete with each other. That isn't real devolution. That is a step in the right direction from where we were before, but it's not real devolution. Single settlement gives us more freedom. It's government saying, this is your suite of powers, this is how much money we're handing down, that's it, go forth and deliver it. And so instead of having, for example, 12 different funding pots for skills, or I don't even know how many different funding pots, you know, this is my day-to-day, every day, I don't even know how many different funding pots for transport. It is a single settlement, here it is, get on with it. And that is brilliant for our region, because it does give us more control over our own destiny. It allows us to work with the people who've got skin in the game, people with the region, to make those decisions in the best interests of the region. And it allows different parts of the country to do things differently, which is important, because actually some of the challenges that we're trying to solve in our region will absolutely not be the same challenges that, for example, my colleague in the West Midlands is trying to solve. It is different. And so we need it to be treated differently, and those decisions to be made in the interest of the people here.
Yeah. And that is the huge benefit, I think, to real devolution. And as we know, you know, the first powers you get, the first financial settlements you get, if you look at how devolution grows around this country, around Europe, around the world, it's always a starting point. So hopefully in time you will get more and more responsibility, and the office of the mayor will get more and more powers, and it'll be interesting looking back in 10, 15, 20 years time from where we started to where we get to, and it's very exciting as somebody who supported devolution forever and never thought was going to happen.
It's also allowing those connections between different parts of the system to exist regionally. So, you know, we've had obviously transport. We're talking about devolved transport. We've got adult skills in our suite of powers. Some powers over where and how we build things, and it's adding to it in a way that shows a connection between the system. You know, really tackling child poverty is our number one priority. A third of the kids in this region grow up in poverty. It's recognizing that in order to do that, in order to give every child here the best possible opportunity, in order to improve living standards for everybody, it has to be about improvements in transport, but also access to work and how we support people back into work with careers advice, how we train people and upskill people, the kind of investment that we're bringing in order to create the right kind of jobs, how we're prioritizing our sectors and, you know, creating the right jobs in the right sectors so that people have the right skills. And so it's that kind of overarching story of the region. You know,
it all connects, doesn't it?
Yeah, it all connects, and it's allowing it all to connect in a way that people here feel like they've got more control over it, and decisions aren't being made about our destiny from the centre. And quite often it's those decisions that are made from the centre that are more controversial, because they affect different parts of the country in different ways. And so, you know, it makes perfect sense to do it this way. We are historically the most centralized country in Europe, and you can tell because what we've had is, you know, overheated growth in one part of the country in London and stagnation pretty much everywhere else. Devolution is changing that, and with a government aim to have growth everywhere, and our regional aim to create more opportunity, be the home of opportunity, you can see it's just a no-brainer to do more devolution and give people more control, more of a voice.
It's exciting times. And if you could pick one future transport project out that you're most excited about for the North East, what would it be and why? Why would you pick that one thing?
I know that it's the thing we've talked about probably the most, but the buses are the most exciting thing for me. It will be the most transformative thing. And then I think beyond that integration, I should be able to get on a bus in, I don't know, Peterlee and say I want to go to Morpeth, and I should have a ticket that can take me on the bus, then on the train to go to Morpeth. That shouldn't be beyond the realms of what we're capable of. But at the minute, that's not how it works. And so
it's making me feel very old, Kim, because before deregulation in 1986, I could get a bus and a metro from Whitburn and be at Newcastle Colley on one ticket in 55 minutes. And then deregulation happened and you couldn't do that anymore.
I mean, the fact that we've made retrograde steps like that just is bonkers in this modern world, isn't it? And so, we will get that level of integration once more. And so, that I think is really exciting and will be really transformative. But the buses, getting control of those buses, we've floated the idea, which will be part of the local transport consultation, of an angel network, which will kind of draw all of our transport together. I still like that idea. I hope the public do too. And, really show us for what we are, which is a very joined up region that has real ambition for the future, and the transport system being a proper enabler, assisting us on that journey of creating opportunity. And so the buses is the big thing. Integration, I think, is key as well.
Yeah. And on a more light-hearted note, you recently completed the Great North Run half marathon. You were actually too quick. I got there to watch you, and you'd already gone past. So congratulations on that, Kim. But I know you love sport, all sports. Who is your favourite sports personality and why?
Oh my gosh, I wish I'd known you were going to ask this. I've got no idea. There's too many.
You've got lots to choose from.
Do you mean from the region?
From the region, nationally?
So
from the region, go on. We're talking about the North East.
Oh God, now it's like picking your favourites, isn't it? The Great North Run, I must admit, by the way, it is one of those things. I would never have chosen to do it. I've done the Great North Run twice now because I feel like I've had to. But
I'll come and watch.
I don't think I've ever had such a the privilege of running number one in the Great North Run was huge. And I still can't believe I was asked to do that. And we have got some incredible kind of sporting heroes in our region who are really driving some of this agenda forward. Obviously, Sir Brendan Foster, who founded the Great North Run, continues to do all of that. Steve Cram, Alison Kirbishley, both in the region, who do mass participation events like the Sunderland Half Marathon and Durham Half, which get so many people out there running and moving about and focusing on families and that participation. And then some incredible role models, Jill Scott, flying the flag for women's football, and which is, I think, one of the fastest growing sports. And I mean, I just love seeing the women play at both a local and a national level. And then we've got people like Kieran Riley, who goes to the Olympics and does what nobody expected to do, which is winning a silver medal in a sport that we all got completely hooked on in BMXing. And it shows the kind of diversity of opportunity. Yeah, exactly. It's incredible. And I could go on. We've got some unbelievable talent in our region. And it always reminds me, whether you're talking about sport or you're talking about culture, and people like Sam Fender and some of the big names that have come from our region, talent is classless. So many of these people have got working class roots, and talent is placeless. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you are talented, you are talented, but opportunity isn't always evenly spread. And so that, for me, is the thing that we've got to really highlight. And I really could go on because these are inspirational people, but the main thing is that the next generation of young people who have aspiration in their sport or in their talent have the access to the things that they really need to succeed.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on very quickly for the last few minutes to some questions coming in. So there's a question from Claire Prospect. And what she says is really refreshing to hear Kim talk about her experience of growing up in a family without a car and how important it is to give choice options to those who don't have cars, example, public transport, walking, cycling, etc. Independence to young people. Access to opportunities, all the things you've been talking about. Would love to know what Kim can do as Mayor to provide more choice and enable more people of all ages and abilities to travel actively. So what can you say on that, Kim?
Well, we've talked about this quite a lot, actually, and recently over at the back end of the summer, we had Chris Boardman visit the region, who is the chair of Active Travel England, and we went for a little cycle ride along the new Active Travel route in North Tyneside. And what we talked about was this idea of travel independence and having that ability to just get out and travel, and that freeing feeling of just being able to go that kids get from, you know, safe walking or cycling routes. And so this idea that we're much more joined up about how we do things, and we don't think about 1 mile here or 1 mile there, but we think about those routes from crucial place to crucial place, from neighborhoods to schools, you know, joining up our parks, joining up the main routes into kind of our urban centres, and thinking about it as a network that allows independence, I think is a different way of thinking about it and guides us to probably different solutions than if we just say, you know, let's put this mile in along this short route. And I think looking at it through that lens will help us to think differently. As Mayor, what I have the opportunity to do is to work with all 7 local authorities in our region on that goal, rather than what we've had before, which is, as I said, that kind of one-off bits of funding going to each local authority and it not really necessarily being joined up. So we're at the start of that joined up journey.
I'm going to bring in another question, Kim, because we've only got a few minutes. Jamie McIntosh has said, great to hear about your views on buses, etc. But what's your views on UK bus manufacturing to support your vision? Will this be part of the consideration when developing the strategy for franchising?
So this is a really interesting discussion that sort of exists, is ongoing and exists very much with mayors and between mayors. What we're all really aware of is that we all want more green buses. We all want more zero emissions buses. And most of us are now on the franchising journey. And we need to make sure that when we're doing that, we're going to be able to order enough buses so that we can kind of transform the fleets. So working at a national level with mayors and saying, right, where are the bus manufacturing hubs? I would love to be building buses in this region. If there are any manufacturers, you know, come and have a conversation, because we really need to be doing more advanced manufacturing in this region, and we're very, very, very good at it. But you know, making sure that there is that really good quality local, as in British supply chain, building the buses of the future, the zero emissions buses of the future, is really important to us. And then making sure that we're working together so that we don't create each other problems when procuring, because that kind of defeats the object of what we're trying to achieve.
I'm going to hurry you on because we've got a couple of minutes. There's been a few people, but one from Adrian Healy asking about if raising the national bus fare cap from £2 to £3 will damage efforts for model shift from private car use. What's your views on that in 1 minute?
I think it's difficult, you know, that we know that the national funding picture and the financial inheritance has been incredibly difficult, and decisions have been made at a national level which impact us all. We have fixed the £1 fare for under 22s. I think that's really important. And we're currently working with the bus operators to look at how we keep as many fares as low as possible and keep them as simple as possible across the region. I don't have control of our buses yet in the same way as Greater Manchester, and so haven't been able to come straight out and say, we'll fix the £2. It's not possible here. We've prioritised that under 22 fare for the time being. However, we will have more to say about fares as we move forward, and protecting as many of them as low as possible.
So we'll watch this space, Kim. So we've come very quickly, I think, to the end of our hour. We've had a wide-ranging discussion then, several questions from the audience. So I want to thank you for taking the time today, Kim, and talking with us and covering huge area. Watch out for future Urban Transport Group conversations online. And can I thank everybody who took part by being part of the audience today as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, everyone.